Charles, one behind. Welcome to the Central Church of Christ Bible Study. We're glad to have everybody here. We're on the stretch run of a study in leadership, church leadership. Have about one more month to go to finish this up. I'm tempted, but I'm not going to. I'm looking right back there at one of our chief troublemakers, and he, I'm old and frail, and he insulted me by talking about how long this study was and everything, and I had to explain to him that I'm getting paid by the hour, and that's why we're doing this over so long a time, but. It has been a long study, and it's a tedious study. It is in depth. It's not easy material. It's not narrative like I would rather teach, because that is a much easier thing if you have basically a storyline or issues. But it is a topical study that I've been asked by the elders to do, and so we're well into it now. Last time we looked at some of the qualifications for the benefit of visitors. And by the way, Linda and I have company today. And if you want to come up here and take my place, you can introduce your visitors, and I'll be glad. But since I can do that, I'm going to. We have our nephew and his wife visiting with us from down in Tennessee. And I know there are bound to be other visitors here too. You may wonder, we are in the part of leadership study that you would think we would have started with probably. Normally, a leadership study would focus on the qualifications that are found in Timothy and in Titus, and that's where we are now. But it took us a long time to get there, because there's so much more in the Bible about qualifications for leaders than just what you find in Timothy and Titus. I think it's difficult to prioritize things sometimes, even things that don't matter, like, okay, what are my 10 favorite restaurants, or my 10 favorite hikes, or all kinds of things. So it's different when you get into religious matters over secular. But I think maybe my number one priority of qualifications outside of Timothy and Titus would be the dirty towel. Jesus' example in John 13, showing that, okay, you guys need to get over this notion of who's the greatest in the kingdom. I'm going to show you what true greatness is. I'm going to give you an example that you won't ever forget by washing the feet of these men who were beginning to comprehend that they were actually listening to the Son of God. I'm not sure it even fully registered on them until after the resurrection. But that example and the illustrations that point to there's a big difference between God's idea of leadership, his concept of it, and man's, is something that has to be firmly established. And once we get that established, then we can start looking at the specifics as we're doing now. Last time we looked at some of the household qualifications, reminding ourselves from an application standpoint that many of these qualifications can be met by any Christian, male or female. Some specifically cannot, either because of gender or because of life circumstances. And sometimes those are items beyond our control, but oftentimes we could all improve our lives by looking at these qualifications and seeing how we can develop them more fully in our own lives. So it's not just something for an elite group, a specialized group of people, there's a widespread application and benefit to this as well. A secondary application, and again, I don't know where we are in the process. I didn't ask when they asked me to do this. I don't know whether we're on the cusp of considering new elders or not, but I hope when that time does come, I hope that you'll think back to the lessons that we've done here and that we've tried to build on. And you'll remember that God has a very specific recipe for his leaders. And that recipe is not to be messed with. We don't tinker with what God tells us to do. And we don't let all of these things cloud our judgment by thinking about, well, you know, this guy's a real prominent man in town. He's got leadership qualities. He may have great leadership qualities in the banking industry or in the business world of some other realm, or may own all kinds of property and have to manage lands and all of that, and still be a lousy candidate to be an elder or a deacon or a teacher or anything else. So we need to make sure we pay attention to the details and that we follow those details to the end. And I've pounded that point home so much, and I know you're tired of listening to it. Honestly, I'm tired of saying it. But that's because so often in God's church, the recipe isn't followed. And then chaos results. And it's worse than making a mistake in the secular world, because that mistake is involving souls, and it compounds itself from one generation to the next to the next. Once you get off track, it's not really easy to get a congregation or a family or anybody else back on track. So it's a pretty big deal. And that's why I am so intense about the notion that we need to follow the recipe. If you're a visitor and you're uncertain as to where those qualifications are that we'll be looking at now, there are two places. We're probably going to end up in both of them before today is over. We've been mostly in Timothy, and we've got a couple of more qualifications that we're going to look at from Timothy. And then from that point on, for the next Sunday or so, we'll finish up with the qualifications in Titus. We still won't be done with the study. There are other specific things and aspects we need to look at that involve church leadership beyond the qualifications. But that's kind of where we are. So if you're looking for a place to turn, you'd be looking at 1 Timothy 3, and you'd be looking at Titus 1:7. And basically, you won't have any problem knowing where we are on that list. I think regardless of what translation you may be following now, you'll be able to pretty much determine where we are. The first qualification that we're going to examine today as we begin to work our way through these is they are not to be a novice. They're not to be a beginner. As some translations say, not be a recent convert. This is God's demand. But I think this rings home with a lot of us because, generally speaking, experience is valued and prized. Okay? Here's Mr. Joe Smith. And his regular doctor has told him, okay, we run some tests on you, and you're going to require an operation. It's a serious operation. We don't have anybody here locally that can do that. We're going to have to send you. There is one guy out in Minneapolis that does this, and he's really good. And so you go out there to Minneapolis, and you work up an appointment with that office, and the doctor comes out with another doctor. And he said, meet my associate. We're two guys that specialize in this operation. If you have any questions, please ask. So you look at the one of the younger of the two, and you say, you do this type of operation? Oh yeah, I do that. I do that. Well, how many of these have you done? Well, this is a very rare surgery, so you don't. It's not like just a routine deal. I've done 8 of these. Now, I've assisted, and as I've learned to do the process, in probably 20 more. You've done 8 of them. And you ask the other guy, How many have you done? I've done 217 of them. Okay. How did they turn out? Lost two. The two that I lost really weren't directly from the surgery. They were from complications that they knew about going in, and they were out of my control. Now, you know which one of those two guys you want. I know the young one's just out of med school, and he knows all the latest stuff and everything, but you want somebody that's been there and done that. All we got to do is shift from this secular example to leadership in the kingdom, and we understand real clearly that we don't need novices trying to lead the church. I don't know that this is necessarily an automatically serious problem, but I know from my very narrow experience, both personally and with guys that I ran around with, when I was young, I was pretty sure I knew just about everything. You know, Mark Twain expressed that view when he said, when I was young, I'm not getting this quote exactly right, I'm sure, but it'll be close enough to make the point. When I was young, I thought my parents were really dumb, and I'm surprised how smart they got after I was a few years older. You know, we tend to have overconfidence sometimes when we're really young. We tend to think we pretty much know it all. You know, I've got it all figured out. Several of us have gone down this road of realizing that we need to change our mind about some things that we were just sure we knew. And I'm speaking now about religious matters. I'm just sure I pretty much understand that. And then I found out, well, no, it turns out I really don't understand that. I may have, and I wasn't trying to mislead myself or anybody else. If you're 20 years old, you better be doing some growing. Now, that might make you feel good until I tell you, okay, I'm 82, and I better be doing some growing. Age does not make you smart. Can't you tell? White hair or shiny head is not a sign of wisdom. But being a beginner is not a good place to be for leadership in any realm. You know, one of our terms that we use for leaders, elders, has a certain implication with that, doesn't it? We need leaders who have experience. There are a couple of considerations to think about determining how new is. One of them is that a new person might have a tendency, we're not saying always, but this is one of those things where you can't mess with. You can't take chances on it. The risk is too high. Keep in mind the stakes always. With the stakes being eternity, the risk is too high for somebody that's a newcomer to be too proud or puffed up and think about, okay, you know, they're all focused on the office, and they're forgetting that these things we're talking about are jobs. They're tasks, they're work. Yeah. And so this is not a title where you put your name on a fancy mahogany desk and no, it's not that boardroom mentality. It just isn't. Or sometimes you can be so wrapped up in the fact that you have accomplished this, as you feel, that your judgment is clouded. A lot of these qualifications, when you get to looking at them closely, basically have to do with clear, unclouded judgment. And anything that impairs judgment gets in the way of somebody being a good leader. It's just basically that way. And you may be a seasoned, experienced, whatever in your field, but if you're a novice in the kingdom, you need some time. You may end up being a really great leader. But newcomers, there's just really no shortcut to knowledge. I know we live in a world where we're promised all kinds of shortcuts. I worked in a field where, people were always looking for a shortcut. And the easiest way to sell stuff is to say, we have something new. And this new really, okay. I knew of a shortcut in learning. It's my favorite one. Back in the ancient days when we used tape recorders and stuff, so you can just update this to MP3 players or whatever you want. I simply took the tape recorder, put the tape on of what I wanted to learn, slipped it under my pillow. Every night I played the tape while I slept, and I just kind of absorbed through the bedding, complex things like calculus, astronomy, medicine. I've learned surgeries of all kinds, and it really wasn't all that hard. I see very few of you believe any of that, and that's good. But I can guarantee you, as someone who worked in schools for over 35 years, there are people out there selling that snake oil right and left. The superintendents and administrators and parents and kids, because it sounds really good. I'm looking for a fast, easy way. There is no fast, easy way to learn God's Word. If I'm wrong, you straighten me out. Just do it, because if you got a fast, easy way, I don't have much time left, and I can use a fast, easy way. Bluntly put, we learn the same way ancient Egyptians did. We learn the Bible the same way an athlete learns their sport. We learn the Bible the same way a musician learns to play the instrument. Bad grammar, blunt message. Ain't no shortcuts. That's why they have practice. More than once. You go over it and over it and over it and over it and over it. And the more complex it is, and you don't get anything more complex than the Bible, it is both simple and complex. And finally, you begin to learn the facts. And then we get to that nasty stage that almost all of us in here understand. It's a whole lot easier to know something than it is to do it. Right? You've been there, done that. So once you know it, then you've got to muster up a whole different skill set to learn to apply what you know. And that becomes a fumbling, stumbling process for a lifetime, at least for me. So this idea of being a novice is something that's going to require time, and it's going to require effort. And even when we are no longer a novice, we still spend a lifetime studying, because you don't master it, you don't come close. And like I say, as you learn more, you'll begin to realize that former opinions won't always hold. Now, we're not talking about things like should you be baptized or not, but we're talking about things that aren't even a matter of opinion. But we think we know. We're just pretty sure we've got this mastered, and then as we mature, we realize, okay, that's not exactly the way it is. No shortcuts to the knowledge and experience it takes. A leader of God's kingdom should not be a recent convert. The next qualification that we're going to look at is well thought of by outsiders. Maturion Kalin. It means an excellent testimony. One of the things that I used to believe, and I no longer believe it, is that, okay, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference what other people think of you. Some people say that, and they really bothered by it. I got to the stage in my young years, and even into my 30s and 40s, where I did not care a whole heap about what people thought of me one way or the other. I figured, okay, if they know me, they will know me. And if they're a stranger, it doesn't matter whether good or bad is said, because it'll just be kind of like a rumor anyway. It does matter. It does matter what outsiders think of us, because we are representatives of God. One of the terms that's used in the scriptures in Greek form and sometimes in English translations is that we're referred to as ambassadors. There's a group of people, I think they're still around, that are termed ambassadors that serve in big events like the Quilt Festival. And I, like many of you, I stay away from downtown and the restaurants and all that like a plague, while they're here, and I just turn that over to our visitors. But these ambassadors wore, I don't know which it is, red coats. They were very identifiable. They stood in prominent places. And so they could give directions and advice and help and instructions to folks that are coming to us from all over the country and all over the world. They represent us. When Linda and I were eating at Parker's, we do fine dining. So we were eating at Parker's the other night, and I saw two women over there, and Linda called my attention to them. And she said, I bet those are quilters. And I said, I bet they are too. And so I went over to them and said, you ladies happen to be quilters? Yes. Well, where are you from? Welcome to Paducah. And we carried on a conversation. And that was, in its weird way, was me being an ambassador for Paducah. If I'd gone over there and poured coffee on them and called them names or something, I guess I would have still been an ambassador, but I think the impression left would have been a little different. How we are around others, contrary to my youthful ignorance, how we're around others and the impression we give does matter, because if that person realizes we're a Christian, we are an ambassador. We are letting our light shine. We are that salty, saving influence. I think all of us would rather be well thought of than not. But for me, it was like, okay, I got plenty of people that like me, okay. And if this person or that person, and that had happened, it does to most people if you live long enough. I've been slandered, I've been libeled, okay. Doesn't matter, because people that know me know better. The people that don't know me don't know better, and maybe all they know is, well, hey, he claims to be a Christian. Our leaders need to be well thought of. They have a good reputation, not only among fellow Christians, but among the outsiders, those that are not members of the kingdom. Reputation does matter. Here's one of those things that, and you may disagree with this, but I think I've thought it through. We can talk about it if you choose. This is one of those areas where your past can come back to bite you. I could see somebody sitting out there that all of us think are spectacular people. They are well qualified in virtually every sense of the word. They are godly men. They're taking care of business, but they have a past that you can't get rid of. God can forgive you. People can forgive you. And then there are people out there that are always going to remember that. The first thing they see when they see you is going to be that past. That's harmful to the church, even though you're forgiven. But the idea here is, what kind of impact am I making on others as a Christian? What are they thinking about when they see me just walking down the street? Well, he turned his life around. That may be plenty good enough. But for somebody that basically they're looking for the worst in you, and there are folks like that, they may say, well, I remember when he was staggering down the street every Saturday night, and caught for shoplifting 16 times in 1 week. And, if that's what they see, being a leader of God's kingdom probably is not a really good idea. Just serve in another way. Remember that being a leader is not the end all and be all of Christianity. We leave Timothy now, and we'll be spending the rest of our time in Titus. So if you want to flip over to Titus alone at this point, that's where we'll finish up on these probably next Sunday. Titus 1, somewhere around verse 7. This is one of those negative qualifications. An elder is not to be this way. The Greek word is othedes, and it means that you're not arrogant. There are many ramifications to a person who is arrogant, that have fingers going out in so many directions. This person that we're speaking of is not arrogant. They are not self-willed. They're not overbearing. They're not pushy. Elders need to be approachable. I mentioned several times, and I just repeat it again for emphasis sake, and also for just to satisfy any mild curiosity of any visitor. I'm going to try to cover these as best I understand them, keeping in mind that God holds teachers to a higher account, because if they lead people astray, that's on them. But our elders are approachable. These lessons are not because we've got some things here that need fixing, but we can always do better. But this is one of those realms where if you are not talking with our elders about things that matter to you, you're making a bad mistake. Put in crude terms, and I like crude terms because they get to the point and they communicate. I know $10 words sometimes, but I find penny words work just as well. And I also notice the guys a whole lot greater than me, like Lincoln and Churchill, stayed with the penny words. So this is crude and direct. But basically, if you've got issues, you need to be able to talk to your elders. You shouldn't be intimidated by them. You shouldn't be scared of them. And if they are approachable, and ours are, then it's on you that you aren't taking advantage of the fact that we've got shepherds that are willing to listen. Well, how do you know that? Have you ever done that? Yeah. I've also been in a place where elders were not approachable. That was their leadership style, I guess they would have thought. It was that style that says, we know what's best for you, and we'll let you know if there's anything you need to know. But please do not come to us with any concerns or questions. So people didn't. I once had a principal that spent most of the day behind a door in his office. I can tell you what I thought of that. I think I just did. We don't need elders whose names are on the bulletin or on the website, but they really aren't shepherding. They don't know the flock. They don't care about the flock, and they basically want to be left alone. I will say that since I have been visiting with our elders here, And not just the 3 men that are elders now, but over the time period that we've been here, how many years that is it at least a dozen, Linda? Probably. Okay, at least a dozen years with various men in leadership positions. It's been that way from the get-go here. If you hadn't found that to be your experience, that's on them. I've come to them with ideas that I had, some of which they implemented, some of which they didn't. It's kind of like prayer in a way. I don't mean to be blasphemous about this, but it's kind of like prayer in a way. You get an answer, but the answer isn't always yes or right now. You kind of get the same answers from elders that you do when you talk with God in a way. You know, it could be yes, it could be no, it could be later. There are all sorts of parameters to that. But our elders are approachable, and for that you ought to be really thankful. It's not much fun to go into a room where you know basically they're thinking, oh me, here he is. He's bullheaded. He's firm about stuff he believes, and he's not going to go away easy. And you know that's what they're thinking about you. But you must do it because you know what you're doing and what you're saying is something that needs to be addressed. It's not a good feeling. Keep in mind that elders make mistakes. Being an elder does not make you perfect. We've already pointed out in earlier instances what their job is there. Their job is to be receptive to correction. They are not immune to the scriptures. They're not above the scriptures. So they are to be willing listeners if they are qualified. But as members, we need to remember, okay, our job is not just for elders, but our job for all of us is very singular. Along with a lot of other things, I'm losing it. But one of the things that has been one of my strengths over my lifetime is very intense focus. We need to have a very intense focus as far as thinking about what's important. What is singularly important is for me, you, to get to heaven. Everything else is secondary to that. And so, as I've told you before, I now tell you again, to more or less paraphrase scripture, when I'm messing up, and that's not if I should ever, but when I mess up, your job is to straighten me out. That's your job. Because you're supposed to care enough about me to help me get to heaven. If you're messing up, my job is to talk to you about that. That's on each of us. I know that half the time or more, somebody's going to get their hackles up because you don't judge me. That's one of the favorite expressions of our era. Remember the scripture, judge not, that you be not judged. And you know what I've said to you about that already, but I'll say it again. Try reading the rest of the chapter. You're right. You did a great job of quoting verse 1. Now read the rest of the chapter, and you'll pretty much have that lesson down. So when our elders are in the wrong, or even if it's not a matter of religion, it's a secular matter. Okay, you really don't want to build a new building out here on this swamp because it's probably going to be buried in muck in 3 years. And how do you know that? Well, because I'm a structural engineer and I've seen buildings disappear there before. they kind of need to listen to that. Or if you say, we are neglecting this group of people. We're not doing it deliberately, but I call to your attention that these people are not being attended to. That's sort of like the Grecian widows, isn't it? Something just needs to be called to their attention. They dealt with it. They didn't say, how dare you tell me what I'm supposed to do? Don't you know I'm an overseer? I'm a bishop. I'm an elder. I'm a shepherd. No. But they do need to be able to accept correction. And we need to give them slack when they're doing the best they can do. We don't need to say, well, you are supposed to know better. Once in a while, that was a line my mother liked to use on me. I hated it. She was right, but I still hated it. You're supposed to know better. Yeah, I know. And at the time I was doing it, half the time I probably did know better, but I went ahead and did it anyway. Let's learn to correct each other with love. Let's learn to keep each other on the straight path. And let's remember what's really important. And in essence, if you want to boil it down, one thing is important. One thing. So let's treat each other like that one thing matters. Elders are not to be controlled by a domineering member. I have seen in a few instances where we had a head elder. Not here, but I've seen it. Every time something needs to be announced, the head elder rises up and speaks. Every time decisions need to be made, well, we all think this, but we need to see what the head elder thinks. And the head elder is domineering and pushy, and they basically shout and yell and bully their way into getting their view, their position on the matter taken care of. That's why this qualification is in there. Elders are not to be like this. There's an expression, rule or ruin. If I can't have my way, I'll just tear it all down. Elders don't need to be that way. There are some personal qualities that are somewhat, these qualities are shades of meaning that are in the same ballpark. The next one is, again, out of Titus 7, argelos, not quick-tempered. An elder is not to become angry real quickly, not to be short-tempered. That's a quality that when it's missing, it pretty much shows a lack of maturity. Over and over again in the scriptures, I'm fond of Proverbs. I would have no idea how to teach Proverbs because it seems there are some themes in there, but when you start trying to pull them together, try that sometime if you want to frustrate an exercise. But there are a lot of comments in there about anger and self-control and that kind of aspect. This is one particular shade of that. This is the kind of person that is lacking in self-control. And remember, that begins to cloud your decision-making because you are no longer in control. You're not making rational decisions based on rational thought so that you can apply what the scriptures say. You're just dealing from gut level, raw emotion. And that's not the way God wants his people led. So this kind of anger removes our soberness and clarity of mind. We don't want to leave. I don't mind dealing with the negative, but I'd rather not end with the negative. And the next qualification that we have is philongathos. Philongathos. If you listen to that word, or if you could see it in print, you'd recognize that prefix, phileo, love, as in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Okay, we've got love here. Love of what? Well, the agathos is good. Elders need to be lovers of good. Some people have the idea, if it's not my idea, it can't be good. Leaders don't need to be like that. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you had to play the game, or someone told you that was the game they were going to play? Well, we can get this done, but we need to make them think it's their idea. Elders don't need to be like that. There are places that talk about qualities. I like lists because lists, I can learn lists better than I can learn great big broad concepts. Uh, but that idea of being good is on several lists in the scriptures as qualities we need to have. There are people that actually don't oppose good works, by the way, but they're not going to do anything to support them. So that's another aspect of this too that kind of needs to be involved. When I was studying for this, I didn't realize this, but I really liked the idea. In ancient times, there were many people, relatively speaking, many. There were some people who had inscriptions on their tombs with the praise that they were worthy individuals who loved good. Now, because there's not going to be anybody around but Linda and me to pay for our marker, we've already got our marker. How's that for planning ahead? But so it's sitting out there just waiting for the dates. But when I learned this, I thought, that would be a thing that would almost anybody should be happy to have on their marker. They loved good. I kind of like that. And of course, this is one of those qualifications that also can apply to any member, regardless of gender or their experience in the kingdom or anything else. And I think we've got 1, 2, 3. We have 4 more qualifications. And I'm going to really work hard to try to get all 4 of those done next time because we've still got some other aspects to look at. Tom, you can breathe easy now. I'm done for the day.